and glad to be representing CCAP, Center for Career and Academic Planning. I am an advisor with the center and first year advisor to about 120 first year students. We see those students every other week throughout most of the semester. Um, and I think we were tasked really in helping orient students in as part of our first year seminar and even during orientation to get started using the iPad, using Notability, using Blackboard on the iPad. And that continues very much. I should back up and just say in preparation as my team of CCAP advisors, there's five of us. We were gathering, actually six of us first year advisors, we were gathering together ahead of time in a classroom, library 100, I think it was 100 or 101, to practice on one another. And so, we have, I think it's fair to say, a broad variety of, actually, no, it's not. We were all relatively uncomfortable with getting started with the iPad in the first place. Some of us had Apple products before, but never had used them, in this way. And so by getting together, I think we may have had like 4 1-hour sessions, 45-minute sessions where we would take turns. Well, we helped each other set up the classrooms, and our various sections. We practiced inviting students into the classroom. We practiced pushing out documents, pushing out, websites or, students to apps as well, so that once we got into the classroom, we had a stronger level of confidence and comfort in knowing, how the various products were supposed to work. Um, I don't know that we are using anything. Well, Notability is one thing that is certainly unique to the iPad. I should let you know, I have one student who has been using Notability on an iPad since she was in 6th grade, which kind of blew me away. Like I didn't know that there were iPads that long ago. But other than that, I think Notability is relatively, new to most of these students. It does appear that they are glomming onto it pretty quickly. Um, some, more than others, and that's fair. They're going to have preferences for how they keep and maintain notes. But some of the things that we are making sure we're doing in our first year seminar is that interaction between Blackboard and Notability, making sure that they're able to and aware that they can bring in their slides from lectures, bring in their syllabus and syllabi and other documents, and start taking notes on those, and actually walking them through the process. Because some will nod their heads and say, "Yeah, I got it, I understand," um, but they really don't. And it's also been nice to see students helping students. We've had a lot of, neighbors helping one another get through or figuring something out or remembering, oh, I'm not on the SJFC Wi-Fi, I'm on guest, and that's why I can't get in the classroom. So working out a lot of those bugs early on, I think has been a good thing for students. Um, Introducing students to the record feature while they're taking notes, I think has also been helpful. One of my favorite recommendations to students has been when an instructor says this is important and you're in Notability, that's a great time to go ahead and pop that function on so that they have that recorded. And I'll mention another area where I think that can be useful in a moment. Um, let's see. Oh, also showing students how they can import things like Cornell style notes, or different kinds of papers, to be able to use Notability. We've been using in our class, well, not in our class, but in some of my one-on-ones, I've been pushing or airdropping a weekly schedule, a weekly planner to students and asking them to color code, and organize their day so that when they say, I just don't have time for anything, we can identify, well, you are super busy, but look at these blocks of time where you do have opportunities, or based on what everything you've got on your schedule, what would you like to find time for? How would you prefer to be spending your time? And the iPad and the pencil allow us to then pretty easily make those edits, live there and free up some time. So helping students with time management has been, I think, more of a one-on-one at this point. We haven't had a lot of time to do that in the classroom just yet. Um, Student feedback, getting student feedback during first year seminar has been one of maybe the biggest and most important uses from my perspective anyway. And when I say student feedback, I mean anything from furthering a class discussion to having more of a personal check-in. Um, so a lot of these, in fact, the most productive ones seem to be anonymous. And this isn't something that's necessarily exclusive to the iPad. Students could have done this if they were bringing a phone or a laptop in the past, but it's helpful that they're all sort of on the same device and having the same experience while they are doing this. So there aren't any barriers to them not being able to, to participate. But having this ability to check in either during class and ask them to talk about a subject that they might otherwise not be interested in talking about, and then using um, a platform like Padlet, I think has been, one of the favorites that we've, been using, but also Mentimeter and Jamboard and Google Forms. Um, I just think Padlet, the visual and the way some of my peer mentors have been using it has facilitated conversations that have developed community, that I didn't kind of anticipate. And that wouldn't have happened if I had just asked, tell me, X, Y, and Z, or turn to your friend and tell them, X, Y, and Z, and then report it back out. So I've been really, really happy with that. Um, since we see each other every other week, it's tough to build some trust and community in those first year seminar classes. Um, and so I think that's helping facilitate some of those more difficult conversations, and I'm looking forward, to continuing with that. Oh, I have a shoot. Just so that people can see what I'm talking about as far as Padlet goes. This is just a screenshot, not from my class, but that's not showing, is it? Is it showing? Nope. Let me go back to Zoom. Share content screen. There we go. So this is one screenshot. My peer mentors do much nicer, flowery, um, and visually aesthetically pleasing kinds of things. But again, this gives students that ability to speak their mind or write their mind and do so anonymously. Oh, I should also mention we, as a part of our first year seminar, wanted to make sure that every student was using Microsoft Word for their resumes. Um, and so this current round of classes, we're making sure they all go into self-service and installing Word onto their iPad. Not that they're necessarily going to use Word. A lot of them are going to, complete their assignments, their papers, and something like a resume on a larger screen. But not everybody has those, and so it's really helpful that they have now their Microsoft 365, Microsoft Word app on there, and they can follow along. And then they're going to be submitting those resumes, which we've done some teaching on, later in this semester. They're going to be spending those to Blackboard, and then we will be using, and this is like, we haven't gotten this far because the assignment's due later in November, but I am hopeful that our ability as CCAP advisors to then make comments and hopefully also draw, I'm not sure, we haven't tried this yet, um, on their resumes to provide feedback through Blackboard and then send it back to them is going to be something that they find, useful and that we find useful. So I'm super hopeful for that. That's actually something that we probably need to practice ahead of time, and maybe I'll ask Emma, you or Katie or somebody for some help on that. That also reminds me, when we were doing our training um, as CCAP advisors, our own little small group of kind of scenarios on how we might want to use and employ the iPad in our class. We've also been able to lean on Emma and Katie to come in and give us a hand. So Katie was into a meeting earlier recently to help answer some questions and straighten some things out for us and things like that. So I would just, want to make the play to anyone else who may be watching this now, um, where they have some concerns or questions, or they have some curiosities and want to get started, but they're not sure, especially in your departments. If you have a small group who are interested in rolling, some things out, you're going to definitely have that support um, from the De Peters Family Institute there to help along. One last thing I guess I would want to mention is related to that SAMR model, um, Kristen, that you mentioned. And this is something that I don't think I'm going to have time to do in first year seminar. Um, if we had more classes, I think we would. But the NACE competencies for career readiness are something that I think are really useful for students to be thinking about. I think it's a little bit hard for first year students to be thinking about them because they're just not seeing, direct applications to this stuff. They just got here. They're not thinking about leaving just yet. Some are, but using this NACE career readiness competencies and interviews questions form, I'm able to talk about the NACE competencies, show them what they are, and then give them some ways to think about applying those competencies, both in terms of resumes and in terms of interview questions and answers. But rather than read through this document, and at least the document, visually is pleasing, um, what I thought about in terms of an assignment was to ask them to answer a behavioral interview question from each of the 8 NACE competencies. I just have one, page showing right now, but doing so by using something far more engaging. So, doing something, finding a meme that can help trigger a response to a question that they may want to use. They can do their own drawings. You see, there's the lifeguard job that they had there. They could draw from something in their own experience. That's where the thing on the right hand side, I was a speaker at my commencement. This is how I came up with, this was about oral and written communication. They can also, by using the record function on Notability here, they can also answer that question right then and there, and then come back to that question, a semester later or a year later, and see, geez, would I still answer that question the same way now, based on, what I've learned about myself, how I've grown through my classes and through my experiences at Fisher. So I see the possibility of using the iPad more in the career development and the academic development side of things as well, because students can come back to the things that they've not only written and produced, but also spoken to themselves, and sort of like practice out things like uh, interview questions and answers, and things like that. So this, in my mind, is, I think, um, an R level of assignment. We're going from just read this and then, answer one question, um, to really rethinking the assignment overall and having them engage, I think, in the content in more unique and novel ways that once they're in an interview, I think they're going to remember that meme or that, that image or whatever else it might have been that, they otherwise may or may not. I think it'll just come more quickly and it'll be a richer experience. I also think it's a little more interesting. Some people will probably spend too much time looking for memes, for things, but I think it will stick with them, and be more useful to them when they're in that interview. So that's what I have to share, and I'm just curious if there are any questions for me.